Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Vulnerable Woman podcast. I'm going to do a quick recap for you, kind of what Tara has shared a little bit about her story, because I know we have some new followers, but I really encourage you to go back and watch part 1 and 2 of what she shared. She kind of shared how she grew up, having her sisters, how her mom's life was, and how it kind of pushed her into almost being a mother at 12 years old. And so when we left off last, you kind of left us hanging a little bit. You were 21 years old. Your grandmother had reached out to you about possibly taking in one of your sisters. And you said that you kind of like just said, okay, if my mom does this again, then maybe I'll consider it. And that's kind of where you left us. So tell us what happened after that.
So this is during the summertime, and kind of recap again. I was not quite 21. And that plays an importance because of a date time here in a little bit. But I was going through a divorce at the time also. I'd been separated from my husband. We were going through a divorce. And then I get that phone call and I'm like, I have got enough going on in my life right now. I cannot take on another child. I had a daughter of my own. And again, I'm 20, going to school, working full time. But I don't even think it was a week later, and during the summertime, but my grandmother called me and she's like, she disappeared again. So I'm like, okay, I said if this happened again, I'd come get her. So the intent at that point in time was to go get Haley. She was 7 at the time, almost 8. And that I would just keep Haley until my mom could get back on her feet. We were going to basically hold her accountable, put these guidelines down and saying, these are the criteria to meet. You're going to stay away from this, toxic relationship that you've been in, the ex-boyfriend. You're going to get a job and you need to find a place to stay. Get your ducks in a row. Let me take Haley while you get on your feet, and then she come back.
Yes. To kind of get her life back together and on track again.
Sure, because I was a mom at the time, so I had that empathy for that too.
Sure.
Being the mom. Selfishly, again, I'm 20. I don't want another kid.
Right.
So it was never my intent to ever go in there and be like, yep, I'm taking this kid and I'm going to raise her because I can do a better job than you, because that was not my goal. Because again, I'm 20 and I'm selfish and I'm trying to take care of myself at that time. And I'm trying to get my own ducks in a row. And she wasn't there when I went to go pick up Haley. So I went there, I packed up my car, got all this, whatever belongings that Haley did have. And it wasn't a whole lot because, again, they moved a bunch.
Right.
And they were back living with my grandmother at that time. And, there'd be some fighting and just out of meanness, the boyfriends would keep their stuff and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that lost. And that was one of the things. My mom actually had a storage unit and it was repossessed. So all of our pictures and belongings like that, we don't have.
Right.
They just don't exist. So when I see a picture of myself as a kid, it's cool. It's really, really, really neat. I really do value that. So I'm skipping a little ahead here. So that was something that was very, very important to me whenever every year I would go take a family picture with our family. Every year we would have a family picture done, and it would drive them nuts, obviously. But that was super important because I didn't have those things to look back on.
Well, because yours were taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, yours were taken, so you have no childhood memories because of that.
Yes.
Well, you have memories, you just don't have that physical picture.
Yes,
of that memory.
Don't have that physical picture. And actually through dealing with this and going through the healing process of knowing that this was trauma and a traumatic situation, a self-coping mechanism of mine was to block things out. So there's a ton of memories I don't have. When people tell me stories, that's what it feels like. It feels like a story didn't actually happen to me. I'm picturing somebody else's story.
Well, it's almost like you didn't have time to dwell on it and heal from it because you were being forced into kind of taking a next larger step that most people your age weren't taking at such a young age. And it almost forced you to have to push those feelings aside because there was no time to heal from it or dwell on it.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize that I needed to either. I didn't know. Well, my attitude at that time was just, this has happened. No use crying over spilled milk, so they say, and just get on with life. Go. You just pick it up, keep moving on. Mm-hmm. And then being, again, saying that it was just my normal, it just never dawned on me that there was another choice, that there was something else that I could have been doing or should have been doing or anything like that. But going to pick up Haley, whenever we got all of her stuff in the car, I think later on that evening, I think it was a Sunday, I believe, because I had to go back to Oklahoma City to go to work on Monday. And my mom called my grandmother's house, and what had happened is her and her boyfriend had gone on like a drinking and drug binge. She had an old, like a 70s car. They went out on the beach, I guess, got into a big fight, and he slit one of her tires, and she was stuck out there on the beach. And then I guess somebody had come pick him up. I really don't know how he disappeared. She got there, but part of it was she had to walk somewhere where she could even use a phone to call. So
this was before cell phones, people.
Yes.
Yeah, so you had to like get to a payphone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you didn't get cell phones. They didn't hand them out. If they had cell phones, because I remember I had a work cell phone, but they weren't commonplace. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was early 90s, so it just wasn't real commonplace. And so she'd walked. Well, my uncle was there, a different uncle, so he went to go pick her up and things like that. I'm like, well, this is the perfect opportunity for us to have this discussion with her. So that's what it is. I'd already packed up Haley's stuff in my car, decided we're going. There's not really much she can do. She could have fought me on it. And we had the conversation. This is, not trying to be, we're not punishing you or anything like that, but just look at the situation you just had yourself, and you have got to get on your feet. You have to do better for yourself. You have to do better for Haley. And so she agreed to it. She was sad, agreed to it. And my idea was to go back. Like I said, I think I said previously that we didn't live very far away. Mm-hmm. It was 100 miles. So it was an hour and a half drive. So I'd go there frequently because all my family was up in Ponca City. And we went that next weekend. Well, me being smart, I'm looking at, okay, if I have to enroll her in school, because school time's going to be starting here in a couple of months, because I believe this is like end of June, 1st of July. And so I'm like looking what my legal ramifications, what do I need, and one of my aunts said, hey, you need at least temporary guardianship so you can enroll her in school and things like that. And she's like, it's not a big deal. I've gotten them before whenever we've taken kids places, like if we go out of town, like state, like she had a son and did sports, and they got out of state, and whenever the child, one of his teammates was with them, they would get that temporary guardianship being out of state for medical. Now that was a medical one, but I'm like, oh, okay. So I just draft something up. I think I went on the internet and pulled an example of a temporary guardianship thing, and I drafted it up and just wanted to get it notarized to kind of make it official. Funny story is later on, we get an attorney in place, and he's like, it was a good idea. He's like, but that paper wouldn't have done anything. I'm like, well, I tried. So we had gone down there. My mom was still living with my grandmother, and we had gone down there for the weekend for a visit. So at this point in time, Haley had only been with me for a week. We went there for a visit. And at one point in time, there's a bunch of little creeks and stuff like that. So we had gone down, we'd taken all the kids down to the creek, and they were playing in the creek and fishing and doing all that little fun country stuff. My mom had stayed back. I don't remember why exactly, but she had gone through my bag and found that temporary guardianship paperwork, and it freaked her out. She didn't say anything to me. Well, we get back and everyone's doing their thing. Well, she's like, hey, one of my friends can come, pick me up, and we're gonna take Haley, we're gonna get ice cream or something. I'm like, okay, not thinking anything of it. And then after a while, never comes back. And then I just get this like horrible feeling. I mean, just like my heart sank into my gut. I'm like, how could I be so stupid? I let Haley go by herself and she's run. She's taken off. And that's exactly what she did. She had finally called later on that evening. Later found out that she went to like a women's shelter. That's what she had her friend take her to the women's shelter. And she's like, you're not going to take my kid away from me. And just was upset. And I can't ever remember one being that scared and that angry all at the same time. I remember I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I've never talked to anybody that way before. I've never been that mad. I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. There's nothing probably legible that you could understand that I was saying, but I was like threatening her with everything. You know, you can't do this. You won't do this to her. And I'm coming after you. I'm going to get an attorney.
What was fear? You're speaking out of fear, number one, for Haley, because you didn't know what she was going to do, I'm sure. And then you're also kind of mad at yourself a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I was so mad at myself.
But in your defense, you know, I think in my mind, now I've never dealt with anything like that, but you're thinking it's her mother. Mm-hmm. So what harm is it going to do for her to go get ice cream, not thinking, you know, she's going to snatch her and just leave, when you're just trying to do the best for both of them. But she's thinking you're trying to take her daughter away. Yes. Yeah. So you just had that frustration and fear and anger kind of just spewing out of your mouth a little bit because you were scared too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Didn't know what to do. I had two of my uncles. They actually took me to the police station. Of course, I go to the police station and they're like, well, it's her mom, so I can't file a kidnapping charge or anything like that. And I just felt completely hopeless and helpless mostly at that point in time. And I was so mad at myself because I'm like, how could I let this happen? I should have known better.
How old was Haley at this time?
She was 7.
7. Does she have memories of this or no?
Yes. Yes, she does. Okay. She has memories because she did later on tell us about that they went to a women's shelter and things like that. But yeah, she has very vivid memories, Haley does, about a lot of things, which is
you almost
crushing.
wish that she didn't.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Then knowing what I deal with now, not because I can't remember my good memories either sometimes. And that's what's hurtful.
Sure.
You know, it's been on my healing journey. But after going to the police and things like that, I went back to my grandparents and I just like begged them, you know, I told them they saw how upset I was and they paid for me an attorney to take my mom to court. And I just felt like I wasn't doing this out of a godly place at this time. I was doing this out of a place like, I am not letting this happen to a kid. If I have the power to do anything about it, I'm stepping in. This will not happen again.
Well, that's just normal. Most of the time, your normal motherly human nature or family, not even motherly, your family human nature to protect your family member.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I did get later on kind of a warrior type complex. I was like, no, fighting for the injustice of all these children that, you know, which that wasn't good either. But doing this with her, I mean, this is something that I was just very staunch on whenever I put my mind to it. No, we're doing this. I'm going to do this. Obviously not even at the time thinking of all the ramifications of what I was asking other people to do. My grandmother, which is my mom's mom, she agreed to come in and testify. She had to testify against her own daughter.
Yeah.
So that was very... I can't even imagine now, like looking back now, seeing how brave that was of her to do that and not obviously understanding the complexities and all that at the time. She did it because she knew and she felt in her heart that that was the right thing to do. So our first step was for me to get the temporary guardianship that needed. And that's what the attorney, he's like, if we can get the temporary guardianship, that's the main hurdle. So go in. My mother was there for the first hearing and things like that. And I was granted temporary guardianship. And again, this is why this date comes so important. It was 4 days before my 21st birthday. So my birthday is August 19th. August 15th is when I was granted temporary guardianship of Haley. So just as I can't even explain that feeling, just going to be able to go pick her up and things, just kind of the relief. And I know she was such a sweet girl, younger. She was always so happy even with everything. So she was excited and coming back and doing all these things. So we go back to court in that October. So a couple months later, basically it's a chance for my mom to do what we want to do at the beginning, get on your feet,
Sure.
get a place, you have a job, place to stay.
To kind of prove,
Haley, yes.
to kind of prove that she had gotten things, or is at least on the road to getting things back
Right.
together for her life. Yeah.
Right. And the thing about it is when the government does intercede in these type of situations, the goal still is reunification
Absolutely.
with family.
Absolutely. Because no one can take the place of your mother.
Right.
Or and the goal is to always put them back with their mother.
Sure. And that was it. And that's what they did. Judge is like, all right, we come back in 2 months, October. So yeah, 2 months for the permanent guardianship. And my mom didn't even show up.
Wow.
She didn't even show up to protest it. So I was immediately granted permanent guardianship, and going on from there, she was ordered to pay child support even, which I never thought I'd ever see a dime of that. So that was fine. And that was never obviously the intent, but why that becomes important also later. So
Did you ever find out why she never came?
Oh, excuses. It was she couldn't get a ride. She didn't have, she didn't have her car. I think she was just living with friends, so she hadn't even gotten a place or anything like that. And so that was it. I would have walked. There would have been nothing stopping me from getting to that court hearing.
Absolutely, yeah.
However, it plays back into that mentality is I just feel like she never grew up from being a teenager. Yeah. So she's stuck. No, self-serving and meeting her needs. And she's not going to go way past her own capacity, her own comfortability, I guess. So guardianship is not custody or anything like that. So the permanent guardianship just means that it's long-term. That's what permanent means. It's long-term. So we have to go to court every year on the anniversary. So every October to renew the guardianship.
And so when you go to renew the guardianship, did your mother have the opportunity? Did they let her know that she can come to that hearing and try to prove herself still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She would be served. We would know where she was at and things, and she would be served.
Okay. So she still had, in those times, she still had the opportunity to show up in court and try opportunity after opportunity to try to make sure that, hey, I'm living on my own. I've got a job, maybe I'm in rehab or whatever it may be, that she's on the path to recovery.
Yes. Yep. Every year. And that became a fear of mine. Well, what if she shows up? What happens if she shows up?
Because you'd become attached to her, I'm sure, at that point.
Yeah. And I just didn't know because we had very little contact. We had minimal contact with her. And I'm like, I don't know where she is and what she's doing. And just, there's fear.
How many years did that go on for?
Almost 3. 3 years, yeah. And why the child support piece plays into that is if she didn't pay any child support for 12 consecutive months within an 18-month period. So it had to be a minimum of a year and a half, but it had to be 12 consecutive months of no child support payment. Then Haley would become adoptable.
Okay. So
then we obviously wouldn't be going to court and stuff like that. Well, in the midst of all this, because, things are not, I don't know, it was very colorful. Obviously, it's very exciting. How about that? There was a word.
Great word.
We weren't normal. Yeah, it wasn't just laid back.
Right.
We had to throw a little extra more spice in there.
Lots of other things going on.
Yeah. In the midst of that, I actually met Mike, my current husband, not looking, obviously. I sworn off men at this point in time. And I'm like, I'm just focused. School, kids, done. This is it. I'm on this little narrow.
You had enough
path.
on your plate.
Had enough on my plate. And it was shortly actually after I had retained permanent guardianship of Haley when I first met Mike. It was a friend of mine. Okay, this is really funny. He's going to hate me for saying this, but
yes, he does this stuff to us all the time. So please do.
Yes,
payback. No.
Yeah, exactly. I love you. But it was a really good friend of mine that I worked with at the time. It was an ex-girlfriend of his when he was in college that introduced us. So that's why he.
Oh, that's not that bad.
No, but it was kind of.
You got to come up with something better than that. Come on now. No,
yeah. Oh, there's some stories, but we don't have time for all that. So, yeah, it was his ex-girlfriend, my good friend, that introduced us. We all went to lunch together. She's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna introduce you, Mike." I'm like, "I don't want to go." I was like, I'm not going to lunch with you. I don't. No.
Well, and I'm sure you're thinking in your mind too, like, I'm finally getting, like, you had a good job. Everything was somewhat smoother, even though you were having other things happen, but you kind of finally felt like, okay, my life is getting on track a little bit. Yes. And you're probably thinking, good grief, the last thing I want to do is introduce a man into my life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you had the fear of this could be bad. Because of your previous experiences, you had a fear and you wanted to protect Haley and Danielle from maybe something not so good because of what you had experienced. So you're just kind of like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I know that would be my mindset.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I didn't want, but there's also a fear there that I would repeat the same mistakes as my mom.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. I wanted different, we wanted this life I wanted it better and different for my girls. Yeah. So
you didn't want to go down that same path.
No. So I went in there basically, if I didn't do it physically, but I had the attitude with my arms crossed, like, I'm only here because I'm being forced. I do not want to be here today, but I'm getting a free meal.
Now, so just knowing, but see, in my mind, I knowing Mike now, like, I can see him thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, yes. I can see him thinking this is a challenge. And I'm going to enjoy this. Like that is like totally his like mentality. Mm-hmm. Like he's one of those that accepts challenges like that. Yeah, I can totally see him loving it.
Probably. I did like everything to try to make myself sound so unappealing. Oh, I am divorced. I have one kid. Oh, besides that, I have another kid too. I'm taking on strays. But so I'm like, I got too much baggage. You need to just go that way.
You were trying to send every signal you could for him to run the opposite direction.
I did. I sent. So I'm not really sure what that says about him. How great. No, I'm just kidding. He's very great.
He's a good guy.
But he did. He pursued me, which was weird, I thought. And we'd met in January because his birthday's in January. That was part of it. He had called me back. I thought, the lunch went probably terrible, as terrible as could be,
You're like, he's not
laying out.
Me.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he calls me.
I did my job.
Exactly. Good phone call. I'm like, why are you calling me? But he calls me at work because that's all he has. He doesn't know my home or cell phone number or anything like that. And he's like, well, I'd really like to take you to dinner, let's go on a date. And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm not ready. No, not there. And then he lured me. He's a fisherman too, so did this. He's like, well, it's my birthday, and I'd really enjoy it if you'd spend my birthday with me.
Was it really his birthday?
It was.
Oh, okay, because I can see him totally pretending like it's his birthday, but it
wasn't. It was really his birthday. I'm like, oh. So anyway, then it's history from there.
Yeah.
So
how long have you guys been married?
We have been married almost 21 years. In January, it'll be 21 years. Yeah. So. Yep. So it was a good choice for me.
He's a good man.
He is a very good man. And he knew going in, my two girls, and he was actually divorced too. So he had a daughter. His daughter she's the same age as my oldest daughters, Danielle. So Kylie and Danielle, I think they're 10 months apart. Their birthdays are 10 months apart. So dating, going good. We get married a year later. So we're an instant family of 3 girls. So we got an instant family of 5. So yeah, Jaeger table of 5 already. out the chute. So,
and I won't give it away, but that table gradually grew bigger.
Oh yes, gradually, yes. And I thought that I had made it at this point in time. I'm like, yes, I did it. I got out of it. You know, good man, good family man, good values. Got to get back into church. So even through all of this, I just still had that mentality of what this perfect family was and what I was supposed to do to be the perfect mom and have the white picket fence, and we go to church and we wear little white gloves at church and, you know, things like that. And those are the things that you're supposed to do.
The white gloves, sorry, that cracks me up. Okay, that's like Easter Sunday, old school.
And the black patent shoes, come on now. Yeah. So, but that's what that's what I wanted. That was my dream. That was it. I'm like, and I'm here and I've made it. And I'm not content. Why am I not content?
There was something still inside of you.
Yes, there was
wasn't
something.
Content.
Yes.
It wasn't right.
It wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And through even all this hardship, so I remember the biggest question coming up, especially after I'd accepted Jesus when I was 15 and things like that, was, which I think is super, super common that most Christians do, they ask, how do I know I'm following the right God? How do I know, or the religion? I know Jesus was my Savior. I know He saved me from my sins, but I was struggling with, how do I know I'm going to the right church? How do I know this is the right, you know, I don't want to say sect, but the right division? Because there's so many denominations. There's tens of thousands of denominations. And I had this struggle of, how do I know this is the right one? At one point in time when I was married to Steve, we actually started going to an Orthodox church because Orthodox means the way. And then a historical thing I really like about that, I love getting into the history of Jesus and stuff like that, and especially now knowing his family background, which is awesome. I mean, just very colorful.
That's another podcast.
Yeah.
Jaeger, you're invited.
But just wanting to know that I was doing it right. So that's the crazy thing. We started going to an Orthodox church, which is really cool. The history of it's really, really cool, you know. And I'm like, hey, this is it because it's the way. It was the church started by the apostles. So this is the church. And you have to go through catechism classes and stuff like that. So it was like 3 months I went through catechism classes and just on this search and not realizing at the time. But then in the midst of all that, obviously my marriage was breaking up and stuff like that. And that doesn't become the importance.
Right.
But after Mike and I got married and we bought our first house and then we decided to have a baby of our own. So I'm pregnant. I'm like, I have it all. And, you know, I'm so grateful, not to God at that time for it, but just, oh, I did this. I made it.
Well, from where you came from, right? And you were trying to make it your goal not to, you know, be like kind of like where your mom was. You were thinking, I made it. I did it. I got this far. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there was still something missing inside of you.
Yes. I was not content. I didn't have that happiness, that fulfillment that I just thought I would have, and I didn't understand why. And part of it was too, is I'm like, I've already lived through the hard part. The rest of this is going to be a cakewalk.
Right.
So wrong. so very wrong. Just thinking how, yeah, this is going to be a cakewalk. And all I have to do is be good for my girls. I set this good example, then they're going to follow and they're going to be good too. And that's what I believed.
If only it were that simple.
If only it were that simple, right. And still struggling with this. So for many years, there's one point, we lived in Oklahoma at that time. Mike got a better job and we were transferred to Texas. So we lived in a little bitty town called Teague, Texas. I think the population was 3,500. So teeny little country bumpkin, nothing town. There was no stoplight in this place. We had stop signs everywhere. And there weren't that many. I think there was like 3. So it was a little bitty town. We lived there for 8.5 years. Marriage, and then with that, we had 2 more girls, so we were not blessed with any boys. So our last 3 daughters, their nicknames are Danny, Alex, and Sammy. So Danielle, Alexandra, Samantha. So I'm like, that's the closest to boys we're getting. So Here we go. And Mike was totally okay with it. But then again, just going back into just this self-loathing and feeding about me not ever being good enough, I'm like, I can't even give him a boy. You know, what good am I? Like his literal family lineage, the name's going to end with us, and the only sibling he has is a sister. So I'm like, we're not carrying on the Yeager name anymore. I can't even do this right. So I had some of those, doubts and self-loathing, and Mike never made me feel that way. He never.
It was things you struggled
It
with.
was the things that I struggled with, and so I could just never be happy because one, I wasn't content. We were going to church. I mean, at this point in time when we lived in Teague, we were there for 8.5 years, we had built this life and I had become important, I had done things like I was part of the kids, they called it a PTO. I think they call them PTOs now too still, but I remember when I was younger it was a PTA. I don't know what the difference is. But I was at the elementary school. I became the president of the PTO. So I'm running the PTO and I'm like, I have status. People know who I am for a little bitty town. It's 3,500 people. So everybody knew everybody.
It still mattered though.
But it did. It mattered to me. I was on this committee about us building a new school because the population was growing there. I got to be part of that. We were going to First Baptist Church at that time, completely involved in it. Just doing all the right things, I wasn't a Awana leader.
Checking all the boxes.
Checking all the boxes. Yeah, I wasn't a Awana leader. We still had Awanas there then. And VBS, I was one of the leaders for VBS and just thought, I'm like, okay, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Why am I just not content? I'm not content. I'm not happy. And then in our marriage, which we both look on and notice what we did, is we didn't know how to be married. We didn't have that example of a good marriage because his parents were divorced. They divorced when he was like 12, I believe. And I never had both parents in the house. I'm living with other people and other family members, stuff like that. So we just didn't really have that model. My grandparents were one, but they didn't speak it into us, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it wasn't anything that was like, this is what you need to do in your marriage and this is how it's supposed to be.
You're just kind of learning, it almost sounds like, as you go, but the way that you knew how to do it wasn't really the right way, maybe. Yeah, at the time.
Yeah, like me, my focus was my girls. It wasn't my husband.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't God.
Yeah.
It was my girls. I wanted my girls to be comfortable. I wanted them to have a good life. I wanted them to be proud of me. Mm-hmm. So it came out of this. I want them to see me as being good, and they're proud of me. I want to be a mom that they're proud of.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
But saying in it too, though, I would fly off the handle. I had this whole perfectionism, had this whole imagery. We want to, portraying this perfect image. And I just held so tightly onto that it was destructive, ended up being destructive to my relationship with my girls. Now, we're super, super close, and I'm super thankful about it. But looking back, obviously, those are the things that healed from. God's like, man, didn't handle those right. And my go-to is to not be weak. When I'm hurting, I get angry, and I was like a bomb, and I would just explode. It could be something I would take, and it'd be something small, and I would just blow my lid, and I'm like, everybody around me is just
on edge.
They're on edge, and they're the ones that they're taking all the hits. You
would bury it down. And then something small would trigger it, and you would just blow up. Now, where were you with your process with Haley at this time when you were in Teague?
So this time in Teague, while we were, because nothing comes easy. Now that I think about it, we were in the process of moving to Texas and adopting Haley at the same time. So it had been 2.5, almost 3 years, because it was like 3 years whenever we officially adopted her, because her adoption date was in October. It's basically one of those appointments, one of those annual
check-ins
for the guardianship, but we had to go through the process of basically terminating my mom's rights before that. So we had that proof that no contact, no child support, 12 consecutive months within an 18-month period. So then we terminated her rights, and then we were able to adopt. But we had to go through a regular adoption process. We had to have a home study. So I had to have a caseworker come in. So it never went through like the foster system, or anything like that. So not to be confused with that. But even if you do any type of adoption, you have to have a home study. So we had to have a home study and things like that. So we're scrambling, basically trying to get this adoption approved because we're in Oklahoma and we're moving out of state. So we need to get the adoption done, in Oklahoma. Yeah. Before. That's just saying, nothing ever happened to see. It's like always there's like 10 other little things going on.
Yeah, that would be wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so when we went, it was me, Haley, and Alex was born. So she had been born in December, and we moved in June. So whenever we go to Texas, we have 4 girls at that time. Kylie is not living with us, so we get her anytime we can. So whenever we lived in Oklahoma, kind of the rotation for Kylie when she would come stay with us is he'd get her every other weekends, and then every other week he would pick her up on Thursday and then just drop her off Monday at the daycare. So we had her almost
while you're still in Oklahoma?
Yes, that's why we're still in Oklahoma. Okay. So we knew it was going to be, that was the hardest decision to move to Texas, was because of Kylie. We didn't, want to leave her behind and stuff like that. So when we did make the move to Texas, we made sure he would go up there regularly and visit, and we'd get her. And at that time, the relationship with her mom was cordial, so we would get Kylie usually every summer. She'd come and stay the whole summer with us. There did become a time where there was some contention and things like that were happening with Mike's ex-wife. By the time that we had been married, she'd been married 3 times. So she was, and I just saw the pattern. I'm like, Mike, this is not healthy. This isn't good, and things. I'm like, and again, this is where I guess this whole me being this protector, and I'm not going to stand by and watch this injustice for kids because kids can't help.
You didn't want her to go through what you went through.
No, exactly. But it wasn't out of a right place at that point in time.
Gotcha.
I know God used it for his good and for Kylie, but I wasn't. I just happened to be the instrument at the time, because I was not in right standing and good with God where I should have been. Right. But he was still able to use me in that, which is just amazing that he would even choose to do that, because I definitely didn't deserve it. And I was very on my high horse at this point in time. So we struggled for a few years. We actually dipped into our savings, took our whole savings to get an attorney and take, Nicole to court, her biological mom to court, and Mike won. We won, which is shocking, especially being in Oklahoma. They're a native. They're both natives, so that's a native family. That's really surprising. That was 100% a God thing, because the odds were not in our favor to get custody. So we did get custody of her, and we just kind of left it in place. It was still a joint custody and things like that, but she would live with us. So Danielle and Kylie are like 10 at this point in time. So, again, I should be at the peak, living at the height of, the perfect life. We have all 5 girls at home now. They're living with us. They're going to the same schools. They're doing their own activities. They're all in different things. We're going 10 different directions.
You're kind of living the American dream.
We're living the American dream.
Yeah, you've got it all looking pretty on the outside.
Got it all looking pretty on the outside. And Mike and I were we weren't in a marriage. We weren't in a loving marriage. We were in a convenient marriage where our kids were the center. So we were aligned with making our kids. That was our alignment, but we weren't turning toward each other.
Right.
during this time. And it becomes, and with his hours and how he works in oil and gas and stuff like that, he would be gone a lot. And it wasn't that we weren't even fighting or anything like that. It wasn't warm. Our relationship had just become our kids.
Almost like roommates.
Yes, it's almost like roommates. I think, at this point in time, like I said, there's just all sorts of stuff. My grandmother, my mom's mom, had retired, and she had come to live with us also at this time. So we had Grandma, which we call Grandma Shark. We had Grandma Shark. One of my kids gave her that name. That's what it is. Her name is Charlotte. So people would call her Char for short. And she thought they were saying shark. So no, she's Grandma Shark. So it's stuck.
It took me forever. Like when I got to know you, I was like, are they calling her Shark? Like the fish?
Yes.
And I remember, I think I asked you, I was like, is it Shark? And you're like, yeah. And I remember you telling me the story. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. But it from the outside, you're like, what in the world?
Yeah. Why are you calling Grandma Shark?
Yeah.
She's mean. No, I'm just kidding. I love you, Grandma, if you see this. So. But so it was a lot of busyness. That's what we had a lot of busyness and distraction in our life, and we just ignored each other, and it wasn't.
And busyness can cause that. Busyness can cause you to focus on the wrong things. I remember when I went back to work, and I'm kind of steering off here, but I was during my prayer time, and I felt God say, beware. And I'm thinking, okay, God, beware of what? And I just kept feeling this beware. And I can't remember what finally made it click in my brain. I don't know if I heard something or if I was reading something. And I just heard him say, beware of busyness. And I have that on my computer. I wrote it down to beware of busyness. Because busyness can get you so caught up in the things going on in your life that you're forgetting about your relationship with God. And that's what happened to me kind of before I lost my job. I was so busy with work, kids, even, and I'm going to say this, even church. Mm-hmm. You can get so caught up in volunteering and being pulled in different directions that busyness will overtake your relationship with God. And it can overtake your relationship with your spouse. So I say that to say busyness can be a problem. Mm-hmm. If you're not careful. So I encourage you to really make note of that and where Tara kind of goes from here, because busyness can be a distraction, and it can distract you in the wrong way. Always keep your relationship with God number one. Always, always. Nothing before that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know that, even though I was going to church, doing all the right things, I didn't, and there's a difference between hearing and listening. So I would hear, God, spouse, family, but I heard it. I didn't listen to it. I didn't let it penetrate into my heart. I didn't understand that. And I struggled this whole time. So I remember even in this battle, like of uncontentment. And so there's this unhappiness. So, and I feel like I'm saying, I don't want it to be misconstrued that my marriage was not miserable by any means. Like I said, you look on the outside, we had everything, and that's what I was frustrated with myself. It's like, I have everything. Why am I not content? I said, I should be so content. I should be so happy and content, right? We were not worrying about money anymore. He has a good job. I got to stay home and raise my girls when they were little. I didn't even actually have to go back to work. It was a more me trying to fill something in myself to feel important, because I felt I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't good enough. I just had to perform, had to keep doing things in that. And in that struggle too, I remember the verse out of Revelation where God's talking about being lukewarm water and how he despises lukewarm water. And I'd go for years and I'd be like, I don't understand this. And I'm frustrated because I'm trying. I knew I was lukewarm, but I'm like, I am trying. I am here on Sundays. I'm doing this. Why?
I'm checking all the boxes. Yes. And that's part of kind of what I shared in the beginning of my story. I have the same struggle. I was checking all the boxes. Mm-hmm. I was doing all the things you were supposed to do, but I still had the emptiness. There's a difference. You can go out and you could check all the boxes. You can go to church. You can raise your hands during worship. But if you're not fully submitting yourself to Jesus Christ, that void will not be filled. Mm-hmm. It will not be filled.
And unfortunately, which through my story, we'll see with my own stubbornness and this perfection, God had to bring me to my knees before I understood it and submitted that, because I wasn't going to, because it was a weakness. I saw this, I don't want to be weak. This is weak. Submission is weak, and I'm not weak. I won't be weak. But I was, like, with all the distractions that you were talking about like that. I had gone back to work. We were about 7, 8 years into our marriage at this point in time. And I did something that I never in my life thought I would ever do, because I'm the good person. I'm this good girl. And no, you wouldn't ever do that. But I was in such a place of unhappiness with myself, not my husband, not my family or anything like that, with myself, feeling something, chasing something. But it was God that I was missing the whole time and not realizing it. And I searched for it in a relationship. And it's hard to say, it's not like it just happened. Well, no, I worked with this person and I saw him and I talked to him and I engaged to that. So it became on an emotional. So then I was in an emotional relationship with this man that turned physical, and I was sick later on. Yeah. Now, while I was doing it, it felt good. I was fulfilled. There was this excitement and things like that in there. But I had turned this perfect life that I had to feel like I was wanted, like I was appreciated in this thing. And what it was is I had turned away from my husband, not to my husband. And I always thought that cheating and having an affair was like, oh, how can you do that? That's just so, I was so judgmental for people like that. So whenever I did it, I was just at the shame part. I had such shame that I just, it was hard for me to get out of. And Mike, being the man that he is, whenever I did go to him with it, was forgiving. Obviously it broke his heart. Sure. I'd crushed him in a way that I never thought I would ever do. But he was quick to forgive me on it and wanted it because he, our family was important to him. I was important to him. I just didn't realize it. I just thought I was a means to an end. I was just like, I was a placeholder. I'm easily replaceable. And those are the things I felt about myself. But no, he loved me and he cared for me and he forgave me. I couldn't forgive myself. It took me 10 years for me to forgive myself. But that was the beginning of this journey that God brought me to, my own weakness and how I am sinful and things like that. And that was the first step in this breaking down for me to submit to him. And there's hard things, and it was hard to go through. But man, being on the other side of it now and just seeing how he changed me in that, like I could have been still, in that life, doing all those things, all the perfect things, that you see with the perfect family. However, I have this fulfillment now. And that was the beginning. My affair was the beginning of this breaking down for me to just seek God and really submit to him and be filled by him.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you found this content valuable, please like, subscribe, hit the little bell at the bottom for reminders when we have new episodes. We've got some new exciting things coming up. I hope you'll keep in touch with us on our Instagram to find out what those are. Have a good day.